The Nexari Empire had always prided itself on three things: their impressive collection of conquered worlds, their ability to make other species feel appropriately inferior, and their talent for turning cruelty into an art form. In the grand scheme of galactic politics, they'd mastered the delicate balance of being just powerful enough to matter and just arrogant enough to make everyone else wish they didn't. Baron Vex'thanor Krell embodied everything wrong with Nexari nobility, which was saying something considering their baseline was already morally questionable. Standing 7 feet tall, with crystalline skin that shifted between purple and silver depending on his mood, currently a nauseating shade of smug satisfaction, he represented the kind of aristocrat who'd probably charge his own mother rent for the womb space she'd provided him. The Baron's estate on Nexus Prime sprawled across 3 mountain ranges, because apparently owning just one mountain range was for peasants. His latest problem, however, couldn't be solved by simply buying more real estate or enslaving additional species. The planetary defense grid that protected his precious world had developed what engineers politely called catastrophic system failures, and what everyone else called "we're all going to die horribly if someone sneezes at it wrong." Enter humanity, stage left, carrying toolboxes and an inexplicable optimism that had puzzled the galaxy for the better part of 2 centuries. Humans had earned their place in galactic society, not through conquest or intimidation, but through their bizarre ability to look at impossibly broken things and somehow make them work again. They were the galaxy's favorite pet engineers, useful enough to keep around, inferior enough to feel superior to. Kai Nakamura had built his reputation on fixing things that other species had written off as hopeless. At 32, he'd already solved 17 impossible engineering problems across 9 different star systems, earning him the kind of grudging respect that came with being really good at something nobody else wanted to do. He was compact by human standards, with the kind of focused intensity that made people nervous and the unfortunate habit of treating every broken machine like a personal challenge from the universe. When the Baron's summons reached him on a mining station 3 systems away, Kai knew he was in for something special. Nexari nobles didn't usually request human engineers directly. They preferred to maintain the illusion that their problems could be solved by superior alien intellect. The fact that Baron Krell had swallowed his pride enough to call for help meant the situation was either desperately urgent or personally embarrassing. Possibly both. The Baron's throne room was exactly the kind of ostentatious display of wealth that screamed, "I'm compensating for something, but I'm not sure what." Crystal formations jutted from every surface. Precious metals had been worked into decorative patterns that served no purpose except to make visitors feel financially inadequate, and the ceiling displayed a holographic map of the Baron's territories that rotated slowly, because apparently static displays of power were for amateurs. "Ah, the human arrives," Baron Krell announced, his voice carrying the kind of condescension that suggested he'd practiced it in front of a mirror. "I have heard stories of your competence." The way he said competence made it sound like a mild form of mental illness. Kai had dealt with enough alien aristocrats to recognize the power play for what it was. "Your defense grid needs fixing. I'm here to fix it. Unless you'd prefer to discuss my species' various inadequacies while your planet remains defenseless." The Baron's crystalline skin shifted to a deeper purple anger, if Kai remembered his Nexari color charts correctly. "How? Direct. Very well. The grid has been malfunctioning for 3 standard months. My own engineers have declared it beyond repair. If you can restore it to full functionality, I will provide appropriate compensation." Define appropriate. The Baron's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile if smiles were designed to make people uncomfortable. "I will give you my daughter." The silence that followed was the kind of absolute quiet that made people check if their hearing had suddenly failed. Even the holographic map seemed to pause in its rotation, as if the universe itself was trying to process what had just been said. "I'm sorry," Kai said slowly. "Did you just offer me a person as payment?" "My daughter Zyla was injured in a hover racing accident 2 years ago. She is no longer useful for political marriages or producing heirs," Consider her a novelty, a noble-born companion for a clever little engineer. The casual cruelty in the Baron's voice made Kai's jaw clench. And if I refuse, then you are free to leave, and my planet will eventually be conquered by whoever notices our defenses are down. Your choice, human. Kai studied the Baron's face, reading the layers of malice and amusement lurking behind the offer. This wasn't just about fixing a defense grid, this was entertainment. The great Baron Vex'thanor Krell was going to make a human solve his problems and humiliate his own disabled daughter in the process. 2 birds, 1 stone, maximum cruelty achieved. I accept, Kai said quietly. The Baron's skin shifted to a pleased gold. Excellent. I do hope you enjoy your prize. Zyla Krell's quarters were located in what was politely called the auxiliary wing, and more accurately described as where we put family members we'd rather forget about. The rooms were technically luxurious, expensive furnishings, rare art, windows overlooking gardens that probably cost more than most planets' annual budgets, but they had the feeling of a beautiful prison cell. She was waiting by the window when Kai arrived, her back to the door. Even seated in her mobility chair, she carried herself with the kind of rigid posture that suggested nobility beaten into her bones through years of training. Her hair was the same silver white as her father's, but where his seemed to gleam with self-satisfaction, hers appeared dulled by resignation. So, she said without turning around, "You're the human who bought me." "I'm the human who's going to fix your father's defense grid," Kai corrected. "What happens after that is up to you." Zyla finally turned to face him, and Kai found himself looking at eyes that held far too much intelligence for someone who'd supposedly been written off as useless. How wonderfully naive. "Do you have any idea what you've agreed to? Your father tried to insult me by giving me a person instead of proper payment. What he actually did was free someone from a situation they didn't choose. Free." Zyla's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm paralyzed from the waist down, human. I'm damaged goods in a society that values physical perfection above all else. You haven't freed me. You've just changed which room I'll be decorating with my presence." Kai pulled up a chair and sat down, ignoring the way Zyla's eyes narrowed at his casual breach of protocol. "What did you do before the accident?" "I was training to be a military strategist. I had plans to revolutionize our tactical systems, modernize our fleet formations, maybe even reform some of our more archaic traditions." Her voice carried the bitter edge of dreams interrupted. "Then I had my accident, and suddenly none of that mattered because I couldn't walk." "Can you still think?" "What? Your brain? Did the accident damage your ability to analyze problems, develop strategies, understand complex systems?" Zyla stared at him as if he'd asked whether water was wet. "Of course not. My spine was injured, not my mind." "Then why exactly are you useless?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zyla's mouth closed, then opened again as she struggled to find an answer that didn't sound ridiculous when spoken aloud. "Because I can't," she began, then stopped. "Can't. What?" "Can't think, can't lead, can't contribute, or can't fulfill someone else's narrow definition of what you should be." Zyla's hands gripped the arms of her chair tightly enough that her knuckles showed white against her pale skin. "You don't understand how things work here." "No, I understand perfectly. Your society decided that physical disability equals worthlessness, so everyone pretends to believe it, including you." Kai leaned forward slightly. "But here's the thing about humans. We're really bad at accepting stupid limitations. And you think you can just change things. I think I can fix your father's defense grid, and I think you can help me do it. What happens after that depends on how tired you are of being treated like furniture." For the first time since Kai had entered the room, Zyla's expression shifted from resignation to something that might have been hope. The defense grid is integrated with 17 different subsystems, each running on incompatible protocols. The primary control matrix hasn't been updated in 40 years, and the quantum resonance chambers are operating at 60% efficiency because nobody knows how to recalibrate them properly. Kai blinked. "How do you know all that?" "Because I've been studying the schematics for 3 months, trying to figure out why my father's supposedly brilliant engineers couldn't solve a problem that seemed straightforward to me." Zyla's voice gained strength as she spoke. The solution requires coordinating temporal phase adjustments across multiple quantum fields, while simultaneously rewriting the core programming to account for harmonic interference patterns that weren't anticipated in the original design. That's actually brilliant. Yes, it is. Zyla straightened in her chair, but apparently brilliant ideas from damaged goods don't count. Kai stood up, his mind already racing through the implications of what she just described. Show me the schematics. Working with Zyla was like discovering that someone had been hiding a master craftsman in the storage closet. Her mind moved through complex technical problems with the kind of fluid precision that made Kai wonder how the Nexari Empire had survived as long as it had while ignoring talent like hers. She'd been right about the defense grid. The solution was elegant in its complexity, requiring the kind of multi-dimensional thinking that most engineers couldn't even attempt. But more than that, she'd identified inefficiencies and potential improvements that would make the finished system better than it had ever been. The harmonic resonance cascade you've mapped out here, Kai said, pointing to a section of her calculations, this would increase overall efficiency by at least 30%. 37%, actually, with a margin of error of plus or minus 2% depending on local gravitational fluctuations. Zyla manipulated the holographic display with practiced ease, highlighting the relevant equations. The original designers never considered the cumulative effect of quantum field interactions across the entire planetary grid, because they were thinking in terms of individual components instead of integrated systems. Exactly. It's a common flaw in Nexari engineering. We tend to focus on perfecting individual elements rather than optimizing the whole. Kai found himself grinning. We're going to make your father's system better than he ever imagined possible. Unless you'd prefer to stay here while I go take credit for your ideas. Zyla's answering smile was sharp enough to make her father nervous. I thought you'd never ask. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in why underestimating people was a spectacularly bad idea. Zyla's theoretical brilliance combined with Kai's practical engineering experience created a synergy that neither of them had expected. They worked 18-hour days, sustained by caffeine stubbornness, and the kind of intellectual excitement that came from solving truly challenging problems. More importantly, Kai began adapting his approach to accommodate Zyla's physical limitations in ways that turned them into advantages. Her mobility chair became a mobile command center, equipped with direct neural interfaces that allowed her to manipulate complex systems with thought alone. Her perspective from chair height provided unique angles on equipment layouts that standing engineers missed. Her need to conserve physical energy led to more efficient work patterns that actually improved their productivity. The quantum resonance chambers are online, Zyla announced, her hands dancing across holographic controls. Phase alignment is optimal, harmonic interference is within acceptable parameters. Primary grid integration complete, Kai replied from where he was calibrating the main control matrix. All subsystems showing green across the... They activated the defense grid on a Tuesday, which seemed appropriately anticlimactic for something that had taken the Baron's best engineers 3 months of failure to not accomplish. The system hummed to life with the kind of smooth efficiency that made complicated things look easy, which was always the hallmark of truly excellent engineering. Baron Krell arrived 20 minutes later, his crystalline skin cycling through confused purples and suspicious golds, as he stared at readouts that showed his planetary defenses operating at 137% of their design specifications. How? He demanded. Your daughter figured out the solution, Kai said simply. I just helped implement it. The Baron's skin flashed to an alarmed red. My daughter is not an engineer. Your daughter is a brilliant strategist and systems analyst who's been wasted on decorating rooms for 2 years, Kai replied. Maybe if you'd bothered to ask her opinion instead of writing her off as damaged goods, your defense grid wouldn't have been broken for 3 months. Zyla wheeled her chair forward, and for the first time in years she looked her father directly in the eyes. The modifications we've implemented will require regular maintenance and optimization. I'll be staying with Kai to oversee the transition and train replacement personnel. You will do no such thing. You are. I am what, father? Your property, your burden, your disappointment? Zyla's voice carried a steel edge that made the air in the room feel suddenly dangerous. Because last I checked, you gave me away as payment to a human engineer. That would make my current obligations to him, not you. The Baron's skin cycled through several shades of outrage before settling on a particularly unpleasant shade of yellow-green. This is unacceptable. You cannot simply, actually according to Nexari contract law I can. Zyla produced a holographic document that materialized in the air between them. The transfer agreement you signed grants Kai full custody rights, which include my freedom to make my own decisions about employment and residence. Unless you'd like to argue that your word means nothing. Kai watched the Baron's expression shift from anger to confusion to dawning horror as he realized what his cruel joke had actually accomplished. He'd given away his daughter to prove a point about human inferiority, and she'd used that freedom to become everything he'd prevented her from being. This is not over, the Baron said finally. Yes it is, Zyla replied calmly. But thank you for the defense grid contract. I'm looking forward to the recommendations we'll be receiving from satisfied clients. 6 months later, the galaxy had learned a new name, Zyla Krell, the brilliant engineer who'd revolutionized planetary defense systems and proved that physical disability was no barrier to technical excellence. Her innovations had been adopted by 12 different species, her consultation services were booked solid for the next 2 years, and her former father was reduced to explaining to other nobles why he'd let such valuable talent slip away. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Baron Vex'thanor Krell, who now found himself in the position of watching his worthless daughter become one of the most sought-after engineers in 3 sectors. His defense grid had become the template for next-generation planetary protection systems, with Zyla's name prominently featured in every technical specification. Kai had established a small engineering firm specializing in adaptive technology and impossible problems, with Zyla as his full partner. Their first major contract came from a consortium of worlds looking to upgrade their defense systems. Their second came from a medical research facility interested in Zyla's mobility adaptations. Their third, fourth and fifth came from organizations that had heard about the human Nexari team that could solve problems everyone else had given up on. You realize, Zyla said one evening as they reviewed proposals in their shared workshop, my father actually did us both a favor. Kai looked up from the adaptive interface he was designing. How do you figure? He tried to humiliate us both with his cruel little joke. Instead he freed me from a family that saw me as broken and gave me a partner who sees me as brilliant. She gestured at the workshop around them filled with projects that were changing lives across multiple species. If he'd been a decent father, I might still be sitting in that room staring out windows and wondering what I might have accomplished. So we should thank him. Zyla's smile was sharp enough to make her father nervous from 3-star systems away. Oh, I already did. I sent him a very polite note thanking him for the gift of freedom, along with a copy of our latest contract portfolio and a reminder that he's always welcome to hire our services at our standard consulting rates, which are exactly 10 times what he could afford. Kai laughed. You're terrible. I learned from the best. My father taught me that cruelty can be an art form. Zyla's expression softened slightly. You taught me that kindness can be revolutionary. The Baron's response to his daughter's note was never recorded, but sources suggested it involved a great deal of color cycling and some very expensive furniture being thrown through even more expensive windows. He'd intended to teach a presumptuous human about Nexari's superiority while disposing of his embarrassing daughter in one elegant, cruel gesture. Instead he'd created a legend and learned a lesson that the galaxy would remember long after his name was forgotten. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the freedom to prove you wrong. And sometimes if you're very unlucky they'll take that gift and use it to make you irrelevant. The universe as it turned out had quite a sense of humor. It just wasn't always laughing with you.